I'm 102 years old, and I still walk out to my field every morning. Not because the doctor tells me to, not because my daughter worries if I don't. I walk out there because that field has known my footsteps for 70 years, and it would notice if I stopped. I know that sounds like an old man talking foolish, but when you've worked the same ground your whole life, you start to understand things about it that don't fit into words very well. The field knows. The land knows. And I am not going to be the one who stops showing up. I was born in 1923 in Harlan County, Kentucky. My father was a coal miner. Most men in that county were. We had a small piece of land behind the house, a garden more than a farm, but my mother kept it like it was the most important thing we owned, because it was. There were years when that garden was the difference between eating and not eating, and I don't say that as a figure of speech. I say it because it's true, and because the people who lived through those years deserve to have it said plainly. I was the third of 5 children. We were not wealthy people. We were not even comfortable people by the standards most folks use today. But we had the land, and we had our hands, and we had enough sense to know that those two things together could get you through most of what life throws at you. That's not a philosophy I learned from a book. That's something I watched my mother prove over and over again in that garden behind our house in Kentucky. The Depression hit us the way it hit everyone in those mountains, hard and without apology. My father's hours at the mine got cut, then cut again. Men who had worked steady their whole lives were standing in lines. But we had the garden, and my mother expanded it, and we grew more, and we got through. I was maybe 10 years old watching her work that ground, and I didn't know it then, but I was watching the most important education of my life. She never complained. She never said this isn't fair or this is too hard. She put her hands in the dirt and she kept going. That's what I learned from her. Not a trick, not a technique, just that one thing. You put your hands in the dirt and you keep going. When I was 18, the war started. Most of the boys from Harlan County went. I was classified as an essential agricultural worker. My father's health had gone bad from the mine dust, and I was the one keeping the farm running, the one making sure my mother and the younger children had food. I didn't go to war. I stayed and I farmed. I'm not going to pretend that was easy to carry. There were years when it sat heavy on me, watching men I'd grown up with come home changed, or not come home at all, while I had been here in Kentucky turning soil. But I have made my peace with it. The food I grew fed people. That matters. That counts. I married Ruth in 1947. She was from 2 counties over, a schoolteacher's daughter, and she had no business marrying a farmer from Harlan County with dirt under his fingernails and no prospects beyond the land. She married me anyway. 51 years we were together. 51 years of that particular life. The early mornings, the long summers, the harvest, the winter planning, the spring starting over. Ruth kept the house and the books and raised our 3 girls, and somehow also found time to read every book the county library had. She was smarter than me by a considerable distance, and she never once made me feel it. We lost our first crops to drought in 1952. Lost them again to flooding in 1963. There was a year in the 70s when the prices dropped so bad that what we got for the harvest barely covered the seed for the next planting. People ask me now how I kept going through the hard years, and I never quite know how to answer that, because to me it wasn't a question of keeping going. The land was there. The next season was coming whether I was ready or not. Quitting was not a thing I could picture. The field doesn't quit on you. It just waits. It's patient in a way that people aren't, and it seemed wrong to be less patient than a piece of ground. I farmed tobacco most of my life. That's what you did in Kentucky, and later shifted to corn and some cattle when the tobacco market changed. I'm not going to defend tobacco farming to you. It fed my family for 30 years, and I did it honestly, and I'm done with apologizing for it. Times change, and people do what their time requires of them. I did what mine required. Ruth passed in 1998. Cancer. Slow and then fast, the way it goes. I held her hand at the end, and I told her the things you tell someone after 51 years, and then she was gone. My daughters wanted me to sell the farm and move closer to one of them. I said no. Not because I was being stubborn, though Ruth would have said stubbornness was a constitutional condition with me, but because leaving that land felt like leaving myself. The farm was not where I lived. The farm was what I was. You can't move away from what you are. The morning after Ruth's funeral, I was up before dawn. I put my boots on and I walked out to the field. It was November, everything gone gray and cold, nothing growing, the ground hard. I stood there for a long time in the dark. I wasn't thinking anything particular. I was just standing on the ground that I had stood on for 50 years and letting it hold me up. That's what land does that nothing else can do. It holds you up without being asked. I have 4 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren. They come to visit and they look at me like I am something between a miracle and a puzzle. The youngest ones are not sure what to make of an old man who still goes out to his field every morning and can tell you what the weather will do by watching the way the light hits the ridge. That knowledge is going out of the world. I know that. Most of what I know about this land and this sky is not written down anywhere, and when I go, it goes with me. That gives me some sadness if I let it, so mostly I don't let it. My doctor is a young woman, Dr. Hensley, drives out from Pineville once a month. She checks my blood pressure, listens to my heart, asks her questions. Every time she finishes, she looks at me with an expression I've come to recognize, part professional satisfaction and part genuine puzzlement. She says, "Mr. Combs, you are in remarkable shape for a man your age." I say, "Dr. Hensley, I have been doing the same things every day for 80 years. The body gets used to what you ask of it." She writes something in her notebook and smiles. I'm not a remarkable man. I want to be clear about that. I am an ordinary man who has done ordinary things with great consistency for a very long time. I got up early. I worked hard. I ate what the land gave me and didn't eat much of what it didn't. I didn't drink to excess. I didn't sit still when I could be moving. I paid attention to what the seasons told me, and I tried to live accordingly. None of that is wisdom. It's just sense. Plain, ordinary sense that gets called wisdom when you're old enough. The thing I notice about the people who end up in nursing homes, and I've watched it happen to neighbors and cousins and friends my whole long life, is not that they got sick. Everybody gets sick. It's that they stopped before the sickness came. They retired from work, and then they retired from their gardens, and then they retired from their walks, and then they retired from cooking their own meals, and somewhere in all that retiring, they retired from themselves. The body follows the mind's instructions. If the mind says we are done, the body begins to wind down. It is obedient that way. My mind has never said we are done. My mind says, the field is there. The morning is coming. Get your boots on. I will tell you what I believe, for what it is worth after 102 years of paying attention. I believe the land keeps you honest. It doesn't let you pretend. You can't convince a field that you worked it when you didn't. You can't charm a drought or negotiate with frost. The land gives you back exactly what you put in, over time, with patience. Living close to that truth for a whole life makes you a certain kind of person. It makes you someone who knows that effort matters, and patience matters, and showing up matters, even when the showing up is all you have to offer that day. Some mornings, all I can offer is the showing up. The knees hurt. The back tells me things I don't want to hear. The cold gets into my hands in a way it didn't used to. I walk slower than I once did. The field looks about the same as it always did. I stand at the edge of it, and I breathe the morning air, and I think, still here, both of us. There is a particular kind of morning in Kentucky in early October that I have never found words for and have stopped trying. The light comes at an angle through the trees on the ridge and hits the field in a way that makes the whole thing look like it's lit from inside. The air is cool and still and smells of turned earth and something else, something that has no name but that I have been breathing my whole life, and that I believe I could find my way home by in total darkness. On those mornings, I am not 102 years old. I am every age I have ever been, all at once, standing in the same light I stood in at 10 years old, watching my mother work her garden. That is what staying in your own place does for you. It gives you back your whole life every morning, if you pay attention. Ruth used to say I was married to that field before I was married to her. I told her she was wrong. I married her first in my heart. The field just got more of my hours. She said that was the most romantic thing I had ever said, which tells you something about what passes for romance between two people who have farmed together for 50 years. I think about her most mornings. Not with grief anymore. Grief has a season, and that season has passed. I think about her the way you think about something that was good and true and is now part of the ground you stand on. She is in this land now, the same as my father and my mother and my grandfather who broke this ground before any of us. They are all in it. And when I walk out to that field in the morning, I am not walking alone. I don't know how much longer I have. Nobody does. And anybody who says otherwise is selling something. What I know is that this morning I got up and I put my boots on and I walked out to my field and I stood there in the early light and I was present. Fully present, not worried about yesterday or tomorrow, just standing on the ground that has known my weight for 70 years. That is all I have ever tried to do. Be present on this ground for one more day. So far, it has been enough.